Okay.
Hey man, how are you?
Hey, doing good.
Good. Um, God damn, what's the name of our channel?
Oh, Prog Knobs?
Yeah, Prog Knobs. Holy shit.
Mhm.
And I'm
It had
getting
been a
getting
while.
old. I'm getting old and things are just drifting,
And
things are
yeah,
drifting away. So I was gonna ask you, what's your entry point? Thought we'd talk about King Crimson today. You up for that?
that sounds good because I've been listening to a lot of them.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I realized that there were some double trio shows that I hadn't heard. So I wanted to try to find some CD copies of those. And so yeah, I was listening to those. So it's mostly been that era. But yeah, that's a good subject to talk about for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I guess I've been kind of, interested in this in the new beat lineup thing, that's
Uh-huh.
happening.
Yeah.
Um, Pretty interesting. I don't know. I just think, that itself is pretty interesting that I mean, it seems like there's some kind of like weird psychological phenomena that's happening with that. I
Hmm.
don't know if you've noticed it all, but it seems like people um well, it's almost like, I mean, there's been this buzz or something. I just keep seeing it in all my feeds. I don't know if it's just me because I've, have related interest things or whatever, but
Yeah.
it seems like everywhere you turn, there's some kind of like, organic promotional thing about it. About the Beat Tour happening, and I had thought they'd already started playing shows like months ago, but I guess they just started like, less than 2 weeks
Yeah,
ago or
because I remember
something.
seeing announcements and it was pretty far off from when the tour would
Yeah, it was
start.
like back in February or March or something. You just start seeing stuff, and like Robert Fripp's making comments, like doing posts, and there's
Mhm.
some like cryptic stuff going on, and then,
Mhm.
um, but yeah, I mean, it seems like it's kind of like grown in this really kind of uh organic way. I mean, to almost to the point where
Mhm.
I mean, I'm sure they have like a PR company, but I was thinking like, if I was I mean, it almost seems like it's like pointless to have a PR company. It seems like it's kind of like a snowball that's just headed down
We're
a
all
steep
our own
incline.
PR company, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, it just and it has this vibe of like I don't know why, but for me, I'm getting like this rooting for the underdogs vibe or something. They just seem like
Yeah,
these guys are just kind of coming
you would think that
together.
years ago, if something like this was attempted, I don't know how long ago it would have been attempted, but like they would have sued each other instead. But here it's just like everybody's kind of mellowed a bit and be like, yeah, go ahead, why not
That's
play our songs
funny.
with other members? I mean, that's cool. Um, and I guess it worked out because Robert Fripp wasn't really going to play this era of songs with the most recent line of King Crimson.
Yeah.
So that left Adrian Belew to be like, okay, well, I want to play them. Can I play them with other people? And he said, sure. So, I mean, it's cool that it happened at all, and it didn't end up in like being some sort of a court drama.
Yeah. No, totally.
It
That's
didn't
yeah, that's
happen.
that's an interesting point. For sure. The
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so I mean, I've seen that, where they were gonna, they were on Rick Beato and it
Mm-hmm.
just seems like from all these different angles, I'm just seeing like clips of interviews and or just
Yeah.
people talking about it, just a lot of buzz. And it seems like a real just like like a really positive, genuine thing where and it's like you
Mm-hmm.
just think of Steve Vai's. I mean, I don't know much about him other than,
Mm-hmm.
he just seems like a flashy, kind of like cock rock solo guy. Um, who, I
I
mean, I
think
just imagine him in
if
David Lee
you listen
Roth
to him play
videos.
solos and stuff, that yeah, it gives that impression. But I think he's a genuine music lover for sure.
Yeah.
Um, but
Well,
for
I'm
some
just I'm
reason,
just
that's
saying
just the
that
way
it's
he
like
went.
you know, he even it almost seems like he's like going to church or something, with this. I mean, he just seems has this like a humble, like, going to some kind of sacred thing. I mean, it just seems like there's no, ego involved or whatever.
Uh,
You know, almost like, they were some kind of like lost band that was everybody's favorite at some point, and
mhm.
then all of a sudden they just kind of like all bumped into each other in this place, and we're like, hey, yeah, let's just start playing music again, and then everybody
Yeah.
gets excited, and it seems like it's awakening all this excitement in different, in fans. It's almost like they had this kind of sleeper cell, interest in Crimson that's just like coming. I mean, just like perfect timing, like the perfect time and place and
Yeah.
everything. And I've seen all the clips that I've seen sound really good. I'm
Oh,
gonna go
okay.
try to. I mean, I was looking at the thing. I think I'm gonna go try to see him in Hartford. I saw they're playing in Albany. Are you gonna try to go see it?
I don't know. I'm kind of torn because whenever like so many concerts, it's going to be something where I got to tell the whole family, "Well, see you guys. I'm going to go do this thing on my own.
Yeah, yeah.
Have fun without me." Um, and how much of that do I want to do? There's I feel like there's already so many occasions where we do that to ourselves, and I don't know. We'll see. I'm guessing I won't go, but it's
Mm,
not because I don't want to see it or I'm not curious. It's just
yeah.
logistically hard.
Well, how do you feel? Because I know that there's some people who are into Crimson that are just not fans of the '80s material. I mean, where do
Mhm.
you sit with that?
I really like it.
Good, yeah,
It
me
was
too.
I would say it's not the first King Crimson that I heard, but it's probably the first era that I bought any albums of. King Crimson was something that I didn't really investigate on my own. It was one of those things that me and the family moved to Georgetown, Texas, from I guess the Houston area,
Mm,
and some of the kids that I became friends with, they had some weird music taste. I guess they had been into prog before because I think they had like their dads were into it or something like that, which was not the case for me. Um, but they were kind of getting out of being into it more or less and getting into some more kind of weird abrasive stuff. You know, they didn't like any modern prog at all. Uh,
yeah.
they were getting into
Well,
like the Residents and some John Zorn, so
oh,
stuff like
okay,
that.
yeah.
Um, but they like King Crimson. I think everybody pretty much agreed that they were pretty cool. Um, so
So that was your entry
I think the
point
first
into
thing that I
Christmas.
heard was like I borrowed that Live in Japan 1995 video from one of my friends, and I think I also borrowed Thrack Attack at the same time. So that's kind of a weird way to
Huh,
introduce yourself to the group. Is
yeah.
an album of edited improv parts. Um, but I think the first album that I bought um, was probably Three of a Perfect Pair. But I know that with one of those friends, we played Absent Lovers in the car while driving around Austin because he wanted me to hear 80s King Crimson because he figured I would like it. And shockingly, I did.
Hmm.
you know, um, so that
Yeah,
album was
that's
recorded on like the 1984 tour. So it covered all the 80s material, plus like, some classics like Red and Lark's Tongue Part 2. Um, so that was a good way to get into the band. And, I've kind of explored everything they did. It was nice to be able to borrow it from a friend first in a lot of cases. So like he had the Great Deceiver box set, so I borrowed that probably before getting any of those studio albums from the mid '70s, and that was probably more than I needed at the time, but it was still pretty cool to hear.
a great Deceiver box set. I got that
Mhm.
too when it came out. I think it came out right around my birthday. Whatever year that was, 93,
Mhm.
93 or 94. I think it's probably 94. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I had mentioned it to my mom. Yeah,
Mhm.
or she knew that I was into King Crimson or whatever, and she was
Yeah.
just looking for a birthday present or something, and I mentioned it. So, I for some reason I didn't think she was going to get it, or I don't know, I just kind of like mentioned it, casually, and then so
Right.
she went to Best Buy, and just this old lady or whatever,
Mhm.
and goes up to this to the sales guy in the media section and is like, and who later I became friends with and was in a band and is like a huge prog guy. So I mean it's like crazy. I mean I'd say that I'd be surprised if there's anybody in the entire history of Best Buy that would be like uh more of a prog person than this guy. But
Yeah.
um anyway, she went up and he told me later that he looked at her and he was like, oh boy, okay, what's she looking for? Some kind of Placido Domingo or Julio Iglesias is
Yeah.
80s album or something,
Hmm.
or some kind of whatever. Uh, and so yeah, she kind of and she's like, and he's like, can I help you? And she says, yeah, I'm looking for a band, um, a bunch of CDs in a box that for my they're called King Crimson, and he was like, what? Yeah. So it was just a funny thing.
Sometimes you just can't
And then
compute.
so yeah, it's just like this lady in her 50s or 60s, however old she was at the time. Oh Jesus, I guess she was in her 40s. Wow, I'm older than her now. Then I'm sorry, I'm just realizing that then when she brought that
But you
part.
imitate her like she was old.
Yeah, that's crazy. Wow.
Well, maybe little kids will imitate you in this era.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's my dad back in the 2020s.
Oh my God. Let's see. Yeah, she didn't turn 50 until 96.
Oh, okay, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, wow. Okay. Anyway, sorry. Yeah, so that was a big, that I love that box set though. But it was a funny story
Hmm.
because that box set, basically my mom came home and told me about the experience, that there's this guy there. So I went up there, just it was like, oh, I want to meet this person, because she was saying
Yeah.
that he was just like freaking out that she was looking for this or whatever. And so yeah, we struck up a friendship, ended up being in a band, and I mean that's where we, I got they were the guys I'd mentioned in another video that were like all kind of like 5 or 6 years older than me, and
Hmm.
they introduced me to a bunch of stuff I'd never heard. I mean, more obscure stuff and European
Yeah.
and everything, and so yeah, I'm sorry to go off. I just that box set, I guess kind of like was a weird divert path, different
That's still a
branch.
pretty interesting way to, well, I guess to get into them, or were you into them already?
Oh no, no, yeah, no, yeah, no, I was like well into them. I just,
Okay.
that was coming out. I was excited about it, and
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
mentioned it, so she wanted to get that for me for my birthday.
Mhm.
I
Yep.
think I just mentioned in another video was I was just looking for metal cassettes at a record store, and
Mhm.
this I heard the Lark's Tungsten Aspect, the album it was Talking Drum going into Lark's 2 specifically
Oh,
that
yeah,
was
that's right.
played, and it was just like I was just like, what the fuck is this? And
Hmm.
so the guy at the record store, that was another weird path diversion point or whatever, where
Hmm.
he introduced me to just like all this stuff. But yeah, that's the first King Crimson. So the first album I actually got was USA,
Oh, yeah. Okay.
because that after hearing this stuff, it was like, oh, let's look through what albums they had, and I think all the other ones were like, it was Forever Young, so they were all
Hmm.
even in early 90, it was like 1990 or 91 or something, and
Hmm.
yeah, probably 90. And they, it's even then they were like the cheapest albums were $15, so I think
Hmm.
all the like
You can
Red
probably
and
go there now, and a lot of those records still have the same price tags on them from
yeah,
back
so I
then.
guess relatively it's a better better deal
That's
now.
right.
Um,
Thanks.
but they, I mean, they had like probably like Red, and then he was playing Lark's Tongues, so, but those were
Mhm.
all like I think like $25 or 35. They had something, but
Yeah.
USA was 15, and it had it's almost kind of like a greatest hits, in a way, because
Mhm.
Schizoid
Yeah.
Man and stuff. So, and then I think the second album I got was um, oh, Islands, yeah, and I was just
Oh,
like, what's going on here? Is this the same band? you know,
yeah, for real.
um, and then I think Starless and Bible Black. Yeah, I found that, and then just kind of snowballed and got stuff. But
Mhm.
on that note, I was just gonna say, I think I don't know where you're at. Well, I don't know. I guess I'm kind of getting interested in the '80s Crimson again or whatever. But
Mhm.
um, of that era, I think Three of a Perfect Pair is my favorite. I mean, which is weird
Oh,
because
okay.
back when I was younger. that's, I saw that as like almost like the adult contemporary album of their collection, or something. I don't know why.
Yeah,
It's
I could see that because I mean it's got some pretty radio friendly songs in the first half, and it's got, I would say, like the production's even more slicker, kind of like a
hmm
Hall and Oates album might sound.
Yep.
Just that
Yeah.
that I don't know how to explain it. It has a very nasally sound, whereas like
Yeah.
every sound sounds like it's kind of cut short in a way. Um, but
But there's some experimental stuff on there though as well. I mean, I mean they kind of but yeah, in hindsight, it's kind of like that's the one that so that one, but then I mentioned Islands. And for me, I guess like I think that's my favorite King Crimson album, looking back.
Islands,
Yeah. I
that's
mean,
always an
it's like
interesting choice.
I
I mean,
mean,
you're
it's
not alone in that. Um, but yeah, it was never one I connected with much.
man,
Um,
oh my God. It's just I really I mean, it was a surprise at first when I got it because
mhm,
I was just like, what is this band? But after a while, it grew on me, and even I mean, I was still, I was young and energetic, and just wanting to like goof on like weird riffs and heavy
mhm,
stuff, but somehow that just like that. I don't know, that just like had a certain melancholy vibe to it, especially the
mhm,
second half that I used to just like put on Islands and turn off all the lights or something and just like have the glow of the stereo or whatever,
mhm,
and just kind of like sit on the couch and listen to it, and
mhm.
you know um enjoy feeling depressed or whatever. you know but
More vibe, like a vibe oriented record, which depending on, I guess, how you hear it the first time might impact like whether you really like it or not. Like I didn't like it because I felt like you have the two longest songs on there, where compared to a lot of other King Crimson songs, you kind of feel like nothing happens. But well, by comparison only, they're just fairly mellow throughout. They don't reach much of a point of intensity. Like Formentera Lady just kind of grooves pretty smoothly the whole time. You know,
mhm, yeah,
but at the same time, it's a nice vibe. So if you connect with that, you'll probably like it. But at the time, I was just kind of, even though I read about the album, knowing it was going to be different, I'm like, all right, well, by this point, let's collect it anyway. And heard it and thought like, yeah, that's kind of out left field. I don't know about that. Sailor's Tale was kind of like the one song where I was like, okay, this really kind of
yeah.
is great.
Yeah,
Um,
and see, for me, it's like even like I did the first side, which has the more active stuff. I
mhm.
you listen to the least. It's like that second side with like what is it, song of the gulls, or wait,
Oh yeah, Prelude. Uh,
prelude, yeah, that,
yeah.
and then the last song on the album, with
Uh,
where it has like that that where it like kind of like keeps recording, and then you hear him like talking to the orchestra and stuff, and then
yeah.
he counts off at the end. Man, yeah, that's I would just put side two on, that, and just like
Uh,
listen to that a lot.
okay.
God, I love that. I mean, it was just like kind of reminds me of in a way, I don't know, it gives me the same kind of feeling as like those early 90s Talk albums, where they kind of changed their sound, and
Okay.
I mean, I don't want to say it's like ambient, but it's like maybe almost kind of like an organic ambient or whatever. I mean, it's like they
Mhm.
were using
Yeah.
real instruments, but it's just kind of like you just
It
feel
kind of
like it's
was
kind of
though.
you're watching this stuff grow out of the ground, and sprout, and
Mhm.
but real slowly,
Yeah. That's a good
reflective.
way to describe what the sound does because it stays pretty quiet throughout. I mean, there's a lot of sound to it, but it's all kind of distant and relaxed.
Yeah,
So yeah, I mean, it does kind of give you the impression of something growing from the ground in a way.
I loved Keith Tippett's piano playing a lot on that last track, where he's just like sounds like he's completely out of sync with the music, But I mean, it's
He
like
played on Islands as well. I know he played on Lizard.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just like he's just doing like this, the jazzy stuff he does, but
Uh,
and it's like it just seems like it's barely hanging on with being
mhm,
connected with the music, but it's I don't know. For me, I love it.
mhm.
it works in a real disjointed way, but not. I don't think it's to me. It doesn't sound forced. I one what I really I mean I kind of like investigated, like why is it that I like this album so much,
Mhm.
and in subsequent years, reading the information about this or that or whatever, and
Yeah.
then more recently even stuff, reading stuff, or interview thing type things.
Mhm.
I I guess basically what was going on at the time was that there's just a lot of tumultuous activity with the band. It's like
Mhm.
it seemed like Robert Fripp was having a hard time just holding it together, and he was almost like thinking of abandoning it, and
It seems
giving
like a
up, or
miracle, like when
he
you
kind of
really
took like
read it.
a back. What's that?
It seems like a miracle that the band existed at all at that
Yeah,
time. It's like from the second album onward, it was just Robert Fripp trying to scrap together anybody who could come in and
yeah,
not leave the band in time just to do an album and some shows, maybe. Because he, it's like every album he had to reform the group
yeah.
and struggle to exist.
Well, somehow, I mean, from what I've read, it seems like Islands was like the ultimate version of that. I mean, I guess he just was kind of like running out of his reserves or whatever. And then he
Hmm.
and Pete Sinfield were at odds. Um,
Hmm.
and so that was kind of like, I guess maybe they were kind of still uh working together well. It's like maybe they were the core, through
Yeah,
in the Wake of Poseidon and Lizard and stuff. But um they started becoming at odds, and so
yeah.
I think there's like disputes about like who did what, or who's anyway. So what I'm saying is that, like, for me, it seems like Robert Fripp um had the least. He seemed like a person who was losing control and losing his grip on what it was he was trying to hold together, and
Hmm.
that album just kind of encapsulates that for me.
Hmm.
And that's the vibe of it, and I love it
Yeah,
because he's such
yeah.
a control freak. And and on that album it seems like he has the smallest footprint of all the King Crimson albums. I mean, just he seems almost like a sideman,
It
if you
does seem
just
that
listen
way,
to it. I
yeah.
mean, there's the guitar
Aside from
parts, but
Sailor's Tale, I can't really remember much of the guitar work on it.
yeah, it just, I mean, it's like he was doing this or that. I mean, I would like to think, what I think is that, and he for a while, he was like, I don't like this album, for decades, maybe even. I think just recently I saw some thing where he was in an interview and he was saying like he went and revisited it and was like, you know what, he was kind of seeing it for what it is. It's like he
Mhm.
just had this kind of a place this whatever, this bad vibe on it, from himself,
Right.
and just like kind of stowed it away, compartmentalized it out of his mind or something, and then
Yeah.
kind of revisiting it more recently. But
And I think that
I
the newer King Crimson lineup played some songs from it in their
I think
shows.
that's why it was like in that interviewing for that process, that this new lineup, or the later one before they called it quits. But um yeah, no, I was just gonna say that he you know I guess what I mean is that, like, whereas more of the King Crimson albums seem like they're coming from like an intent, like
Mhm.
this is what I want to do, and this is what I intend to do, and I'm going to present it this way, and I'm gonna wrap it up nicely and control it, because this is how I want it to be, and it seems like this one was just kind of like he was so bogged down with chaos in his life that it was just more like kind of coming about or naturally, or um stream of consciousness. It seems like a Fripp stream of consciousness album, and I
Yeah.
love it for that. I mean, it's anyway.
I always like the sort of collage-like nature of Lizard. Um,
Mm.
so I'm not sure about if you ever got into that album too much or
Yeah,
not,
no,
but
totally. Yeah.
yeah, Lizard's just it's so out there and it has so much going on most of the time. And that's another one you have to wonder how it was made. It's like everything seems so separate from everything else. Like, you'll hear a guitar part and it seems to have little to do with what everybody else is playing. Like, you have Keith Tippett doing piano parts. Everybody seems to be, it's almost like they're playing different songs in a way, and then it's collaged together and just becomes this sort of fascinating um, sort of mess in a way. but it's
Yeah.
still a really cool album. I mean, it's nice to revisit because of all that, because there's always something new to pick out. Um,
Yeah, no, you're right. It's weird how some of those out like well a lot of some of the like the Lizard for sure.
mhm.
Um, I remember thinking kind of like what you're saying is that it's one of these albums that it like almost confuses your consciousness
Mhm.
to a point where I just felt myself kind of switching off
Yeah.
when I'm able to pay attention to. And so yeah, different times it would be like, oh wait, this I don't even remember that.
Mhm.
Okay. And then I'm like, okay, you know what, I'm gonna listen, I'm gonna make sure to just like try to listen for everything, and then it just like
Mhm.
scatters my brain while I'm listening to it. And
Yeah.
but um
One
yeah,
one
go
thing
ahead.
about King Crimson, they're so they're often credited as one of the groups, and I'm not never terribly interested in this conversation, but it's one that people always have, is that they were the first progressive rock band, and that Schizoid Man was probably the song that really started that as a genre. Um, and I've got no argument against that, but that's always a fun thing to talk about. Is did they really start Prague, and who else could have if they didn't? Or is it even relevant who started it? Because it's kind of happened more or less as an organic process, I think.
Yeah, I think, well,
Musicians who were into sort of a psychedelic sound, this simply became better at what they did and probably more ambitious and
yeah.
um, looking for other things to combine. And
Well,
that's
I
how you
think I like what I mentioned that YouTuber Andy Edwards in a
uh,
previous video we did, but I don't know if you've checked any of his stuff out. But
I
he's
know.
got some really good stuff. But I think he's got a video where he talks about that, and he breaks it down pretty well, and I agree with it.
Yeah.
Which is just saying that like you can point to different things that seem progressive.
Hmm.
Before that, a lot of people like to claim Moody Blues, which I mean, it's just funny. I've yet to just like you know freak out on Moody Blues or delve into that. Like,
I've got a couple of their CDs now, and so I mean, I could see it some of the time. Like you could see some sonic resemblances, like with the Mellotron, of
yeah,
course, and some of the melodic nature might have a passing resemblance to prog albums or songs. But overall, it just doesn't have like the song construction or
right.
the rhythmic nature of prog rock at all.
Yeah.
Uh,
So, it's like he was saying like there was Frank Zappa before, obviously before Crimson, there was Moody
mhm,
Blues, there was you can look at lots of stuff with it was like kind of like coming like jazz that was trying to be rock, and
mhm,
those kind of things. But his take was just that, King Crimson is like the first thing where it's like it kind of like all melds into a package that just says like, well, this is, it's like, yeah, there have been progressive things that have happened, a couple years
mhm,
within the last 2 years before that, but
mhm,
this is kind of like where it just like is just defined. I mean, it's like you can't really say like, oh, this is like a jazz group or this is a rock group that's doing some progressive things or this is,
mhm.
like a garage rock band that's doing some psychedelic stuff. It's
Right.
just that's kind of like the first album where it's is what what people started calling it or referring to it as.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have 10 minutes left, but I did want to get to just like at some point with the Crimson
Mhm,
talk. I mean, and we can do about talk about other things, but I wanted to get into like like kind of what the later part of their or middle late part of their career.
mhm.
And like how it affected you or what and me. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess I got into Crimson before you, and I kind of like just I was
Yeah.
just
Because
a
I got into
complete
them in
complete just like a
1998,
insufferable King Crimson nut. I mean, I was just like annoy all my friends. I had like all their albums, all the vinyl, like on the wall and stuff. People used to just make fun of it and
yeah.
take pictures of it and just like tell and because nobody else was like interested in that. None of my friends were, and
For me, it was the opposite. It was my friends who had to annoy me to get into them. Because at the time I was listening to, I think, obviously Rush, Dream Theater, but a lot of the modern prog bands that were kind of like, I would say, branched off from Dream Theater's sound. And they weren't into that, but they're like, man, I bet he would really like King Crimson. He, and they're like, you need to listen to King Crimson. And it was the one time that their pushiness worked, I would say. You know, compared to it had the opposite effect with a group like Ween, where they were all big Ween fans,
Oh yeah.
and I was off put by their fandom basically, and didn't try listening to them at all for like 3 years
Yeah.
because I
No,
was just
I know
like,
what you
you
mean.
know, I've moved by now. It's nice to have a break from that, and then I could finally think like, oh yeah, they were into this group. I wonder what they're actually like when I sit down to listen to them, rather than have it pushed on me in the car.
Yeah, man, I that's a thing for sure. It's like, yeah, I mean, obviously I've done that as well. Just, the fandom just annoys you so much that you're just like, I don't even want to try. I mean, I'll put this on pause, for a while.
Yeah.
But
I have to enjoy something on my own, basically, because there's an instinctive resistance to it otherwise.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that's true. I at some point in the mid to late '90s, I just kind of well, they started touring, so the first sign of a tour, it was just, I think it was 90. They did like a leg up in the northern United States,
Mhm.
just kind of like a short leg, and the closest one to Fort Worth was Cincinnati. So
Oh wow.
it was the Vroom tour, and so
Okay.
yeah, they only released Vroom, and I got that
I'm
and
looking
got my
forward to that.
signed autograph copy and stuff,
Yeah.
and then drove up there with a buddy and saw him in Cincinnati, and that's where I was like, uh, manhandled by Bruford backstage. But
Right.
no, that was cool. The back door was open, so I snuck in. I just like watched the rehearsal for a while, and then they
Mhm.
all started kind of like going to do something, and then Bruford walks by. It's like I'm just like back then. I'm like, what do I do now? Like, because Fripp was just sitting on the stage, like whatever, 15 or 20 feet in front of me, and he didn't know I was there, and he was just like messing around with his guitar or something, and then Bruford walks by with a sandwich or something, and he's like, who are you? And I'm and he's like, well, what are you fucking doing here? And I'm like, nah, I just, and he's just like, yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, you need to fucking get out of here. And I was like, oh, I don't, and he grabs me by the collar, and just like, start, and just like, it's like shoving me out the back
Wow.
door and stuff, and slams the door. And then when I,
And that's not even his job, though. You know, don't they have other people to do? Like, you should go
yeah,
tell
yeah.
somebody.
And then, I ran around the side, and I was like, oh my God, I just got, roughed up by Ruford to my buddy. And then they were like, yeah, they came out to go do something or whatever. So everybody was taking pictures and getting autographs and stuff. And so he came out, and I said, and my friend was like, hey, can we get a picture with you? And he's like, sure. And he looks at me and goes, oh, it's you again. I suppose I'll take a picture with you. And then, so we got a picture together. But, um, uh, yeah, then they did the released Thrack, yeah, and then
Yeah.
they did those tours through Texas, and I saw them in a few, like, yeah, Austin, Houston, and Fort Worth, and then after that it's just like, I don't know, I started really getting more into jazz, and
Mhm.
it just so when they released those albums like around 2000 or early 2000s and stuff,
Mhm.
I checked them out, and it was just like, I mean, it just seemed like they just kind of like turned into some. I mean, it was like, oh, I wanted to. I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot. Something I wanted to bring up though is that you
Yeah.
know the whole thing. Like, I don't know. I kind of consider like their angle, like it's kind of like some kind of play on Nanny Nanny Boo Boo. It's like. Da na 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 boo boo na na da da
Oh yeah.
na na
Okay.
na 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 na. Some just like a sinister, generic blues, bass line, or riff or
Mhm.
whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and so, you have like Red and stuff where they kind of refine that angle or whatever a little bit
Mhm.
more, but it still sounds rough and like kind of cool.
Hmm.
Then you get, then they start doing it a little bit in the 80s period, and it still, has sounds cool.
Hmm.
And they do it in the early in the 90s, in the early 90s, and it's like yeah, it's and it just seems like, and then you get to the 2000s and it just seems like it's just like so condensed and just like
Hmm.
just basic sounding, and just, I mean, it's like there's no, how do you what's I mean, I should have thought about the best way to put this. It just seems like it's like reduced, like
Hmm.
to just like, just sounding, just, I guess you would say meta, Crimson or something, just, it's just like, hey, just in case you didn't know that this was our angle, we're just gonna make this painfully simple, like that this is what our sound is.
They also, I guess, so after the double trio split up, after some rehearsals in 1997, they did the projects, uh,
Oh yeah, I actually saw
Project
one of
One,
those.
Two,
Yeah.
Four. Yeah, and then after that, reformed as a four-piece group and did an album in 2000. But at this point, and they're not the only band who kind of fell victim to this. They unfortunately started kind of responding musically to fan criticism, I think. I think a song like Prozac Blues, if you're familiar with it, which might
Oh
might be kind
yeah.
of what
Oh
you're talking
Jesus.
about, um, is a bit of a response to some drama that was going on the Elephant Talk newsletter, which I think artistically, and people can't help this, but you really don't want that. And they're not the only band who got caught up in that. I think there's this prog metal group called Pain of Salvation. They wrote a really simple song on an album that was released in 1999, and that was a response to something on a message board. Um, they were saying, I guess the nature of prog can't be 4/4, and stuff like that. So they're writing a 4/4 song with like two notes in it the whole time, and that's it, or two chords, and that's all. Kind of like a response to fans. And looking back on it, it's like, yeah, I get it. I get why to do that, but as an artistic direction, it could go back to haunt you a bit.
Yeah.
So, um, I
Anyway, by
wanted
that
to
point,
say,
I was just kind of into different stuff, and it
yeah,
just seemed like they just kind of like reduce their sound and essence to, which is what a lot of 90s bands did. I mean, I just feel like in production in general, everything became more boutiqued, and it's like, hey, let's take what is our music and just like make it just into like a block riff, type
mhm,
thing, instead of where you'd have like some looseness to the music, or some jangle, or some, just
mhm,
like some rough around the edges, and that was what was cool, those little
right.
essences, it. Anyway, this thing's gonna cut off. Should we do it another video, continue, or just like call it a Crimson Day? What do you think?
Well, we could want to do one tomorrow
Oh, like a
because I got more
part
to
two?
talk about King Crimson because I've recently heard some of the project albums. So
Let's
yeah,
do
we
it.
got.
All right, we'll do part two tomorrow.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, take
All
care,
right,
man.
bye bye.